In a single sentence, my grandmother's will shattered years of fake smiles and polite lies. My parents, who once promised family meant sharing, tried to steal my home with one word: fairness. But I stood my ground, and that's when they showed their true faces. Where are you watching this video from? I'd love to know. Drop your location in the comments. Hit that like button and stay with me. I'm about to tell you how it all began. I was still smoothing out the creases in my blouse when the lawyer called my name. Alice Monroe, he said, eyes kind behind thick glasses. I nodded and took a seat at the long oak table. The room smelled faintly of lemon polish and old paper, sterile, yet somehow heavy, like it already knew what was about to happen. My parents, Donald and Marissa, sat across from me, their posture stiff, their smiles brittle. My younger sister Lauren, radiant in a pastel dress that screamed bride-to-be, was flanked by her fiancé and sipping something from a thermos. I couldn't help but notice her phone was already open, probably browsing wedding favors or floral arrangements. No one looked at me. The will reading began with formalities: the date of my grandmother's passing, the executor's role, the assets listed in dry legal terms. My heart was pounding so hard I barely registered the words. I had spent the last 5 years caring for Grandma June, watching her fade from the strong, no-nonsense woman who ran her flower shop to a fragile figure who sometimes didn't remember my name but always clutched my hand at night. Then the lawyer cleared his throat. The townhouse at 42 Willow Lane and the adjacent property, including the closed flower shop, shall be passed in full to Alice Monroe. The silence was deafening. I blinked. My ears buzzed. Did I hear that right? Alice is to inherit the property solely, he repeated, glancing around the table. I felt every eye swing toward me, Donald's jaw clenched, Marissa's fingers tightening around her silk scarf, and Lauren, well, for once she had nothing to say. I tried to breathe, tried to process what I just heard, but it felt like the floor had tilted. This house, the shop, it wasn't just property to me. It was home. It was where I stayed up with Grandma through long nights, brought her soup when she was too weak to leave bed, read to her in the garden when the sun felt good on her skin. I'm sure we can come to an arrangement, Donald finally said, his voice syrupy with restraint. It wouldn't be fair to divide everything unevenly, not with Lauren's wedding coming up. Right, sweetheart. He looked at Marissa, who nodded quickly. Yes, Marissa chimed in, plastering a wide smile. Maybe we could sell the house and split the proceeds. That would be fair. We're family after all. Fair. That word echoed like a slap. I looked at them, these people who hadn't visited Grandma in months, who hadn't changed her linens or sat with her through the endless nights of confusion and fear. I'm keeping the house, I said, my voice low but steady. A pause. Then Donald's face darkened and Marissa's smile vanished. The room grew icy. Lauren scoffed and finally looked up. Seriously, Alice, what about me? I'm getting married. Do you know how much a venue costs? I stood my ground. I know what Grandma wanted. And just like that, the masks dropped. No more smiles, just fury, raw and unfiltered. Donald shoved his chair back with a loud scrape. We'll see about this, he muttered, storming toward the door. Marissa followed, her heels sharp against the floor. Lauren rolled her eyes, gathered her things, and stalked out without another word. I stayed seated, hands trembling in my lap, heart pounding, but I didn't move. That townhouse was mine, and I was ready to fight for it. The apartment was too quiet that night. You know, that kind of silence where your own breath feels loud. That's what I came home to, just me, my second-hand sofa, and a faded photo frame I kept on the windowsill. I didn't turn on the lights. I didn't need to. The glow from the street lamp outside cast soft shadows across the room, just enough for me to see the little things that reminded me of her. Grandma June. I sat on the floor, not even bothering to take off my shoes. My legs folded beneath me automatically, like muscle memory, the same way I used to sit next to her bed during those last months when she was too weak to get up. And I just sat, for a long time. That will reading felt like it happened days ago, but it had only been hours. I could still hear my father's voice dripping with false calmness, could still see the sharp look in my mother's eyes, calculated, like she was already figuring out how to undo this. But none of that mattered right now. Not in this small apartment, not in this moment. What mattered was the memory I held in my hands. A photo. It was a little warped at the edges from years of handling, but I couldn't bear to replace it. In it, Grandma June and I were standing in front of the flower shop, her flower shop, with our aprons on, both of us laughing at something just off camera. She was holding a bouquet of lilacs, her favorite, and I was holding a watering can twice the size I needed. I must have been, 18, maybe 19. That was before she got sick, before the slow unraveling began. People think caretaking is all about the big moments, the dramatic hospital visits, the midnight emergencies. But it's really about the tiny things, the routine, making tea just how she liked it, even when she forgot and asked again 5 minutes later, setting out her slippers every night, even when she couldn't walk without help, being patient when she confused me with her sister, or when she didn't remember why she was crying. It was missing work shifts, turning down dates, letting friendships fade because I was just too tired, too stretched thin. I rubbed my thumb over the glass of the frame, tracing the outline of her smile. She had a way of making everything feel okay, even when it clearly wasn't. I remember the last real conversation we had before she slipped into that fog for good. It was a warm afternoon and the window was open to let in the scent of lilacs from the tiny patch of garden out back. "You're stronger than you think, Alice," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. I didn't feel strong. I felt frayed, exhausted, alone. She had patted my hand, her eyes still so sharp in that moment. "Don't let anyone push you out of what's yours." I didn't know what she meant then, but I do now. She knew. Maybe not the details, but she knew what my parents were capable of, their ambition, their knack for twisting things in their favor. She'd seen it before. She'd been watching. I set the photo down and got up to make tea, out of habit more than anything else. The kettle took forever to boil, or maybe I was just impatient. Either way, standing there in the kitchen, I realized how thin my resources were. This apartment was temporary. The job I had barely covered the bills. I was scraping by, barely holding it together. And yet, I had something now, something real. That townhouse, that flower shop, it wasn't just property. It was history. It was the one place I'd always felt rooted. I carried the tea back to the couch, wrapping myself in the old knit blanket Grandma had made me years ago. The fabric was worn thin in places, but it still smelled faintly of lavender. Funny how scent lingers, isn't it? Outlasts everything. I let the tea grow cold in my hands as I stared at the ceiling. I should have felt triumphant, victorious. I'd been named the sole heir against all odds, but instead I felt unsettled, like I was waiting for the other shoe to drop, because I knew my parents. They didn't lose gracefully, especially not when there was money or pride on the line. Still, I'd said no. Calmly, firmly. That moment at the lawyer's office played over and over in my head like a scene from a movie. I could see their faces, the disbelief turning to cold fury. I didn't raise my voice. I didn't cry. I just said no. And that no felt like the first real step I'd taken in a long time. I took another sip of tea, now lukewarm, and pulled the blanket tighter around my shoulders. The night was quiet again, peaceful in a strange way. Somewhere out there, my parents were probably scheming. Lauren was probably complaining about how unfair everything was, how I'd ruined her perfect wedding plans. But here, in this tiny apartment with peeling paint and a leaky faucet, I felt something else. Not fear, not sadness, something like quiet triumph. Fragile maybe, but real. I didn't have much, but I had the truth. I had Grandma's words echoing in my mind. And I had the keys to something no one could take away, not without a fight. And I was ready. The key still fit. I hadn't been inside the flower shop in nearly a year, not since the day we closed it for good. Yet as I turned the lock and pushed the heavy door open, the scent hit me like a memory I didn't know I'd been holding back. Lilacs. Even after all this time, the air still held a faint trace of them, mingled with dust and time. I stepped inside slowly, letting the door swing closed behind me with a soft creak. The dim afternoon light filtered through the front windows, casting long shadows across the wooden floor. Dust motes floated lazily in the beams, swirling in the quiet. This place, it wasn't just a shop. It was Grandma's world. And mine, too. The shelves were still lined with old ceramic pots, some cracked, some chipped, all of them exactly where we left them. The register sat on the counter like it was waiting for us to open up again. And beneath it, the tiny stool I used to sit on when my feet hurt from standing all day. I walked to the middle of the shop and stood still, letting the memories come. I could almost hear the soft clink of scissors snipping stems, Grandma humming as she arranged bouquets with practiced hands. I'd watch her move with this calm confidence, like every flower had a place, every color a meaning. Floristry is storytelling, she used to say. You just use petals instead of words. I never understood what she meant back then. I was always rushing around, trying to keep up, worried about bills, inventory, deliveries. But now, standing in the quiet, her words made sense. Every bloom she touched had love behind it. Joy, grief, celebration, farewell, all of it woven into petals and stems. I knelt beside the display table in the center of the room, brushing my fingers over the surface. The varnish had worn down in spots where we worked the most. I found myself smiling, just a small, private smile. How many late nights had we spent here? After closing, sweeping up, counting the till, drinking tea in mismatched mugs while she told me stories about the old days, about how she and Grandpa built this shop from nothing, brick by brick, bouquet by bouquet. She always called it our legacy. I'd almost forgotten that. I sat down cross-legged on the floor, my back against the old cash wrap, and just breathed. For the first time in days, I let my guard down. No lawyers, no accusations. No icy smiles from Marissa or passive-aggressive sighs from Donald. No snide comments from Lauren about my modest lifestyle or how I should really put myself out there more. Just me and the shop. I reached into my bag and pulled out a notebook. I'd brought it on impulse, not sure what I planned to write. Maybe a to-do list. Maybe a dream. But instead, I opened to a blank page and began sketching. Not flowers, plans. I drew rough outlines of the townhouse above and the shop below, trying to remember every detail. What needed fixing, what could wait. I wrote notes in the margins: replace front window, paint walls, restore wooden shelves, and beneath it all I wrote, move in soon. The words sat there, bold and defiant. It felt like claiming something they thought I didn't deserve. But I did, not because of the will, not because of any legal document, because I was here. I stayed. I was the one who helped Grandma down the stairs when her knees gave out, who closed the shop each evening when she couldn't make it through a full day. I was the one who cooked her meals, managed her pills, stayed up during the long nights when she couldn't sleep. And not once did Donald or Marissa offer to take over. Not once did Lauren show up to help, not even a phone call some weeks. But now that the house was worth something, suddenly they wanted to divide it. No, I closed the notebook gently and placed it on the floor beside me. I didn't want revenge. I didn't want drama or courtrooms or public spectacles. I just wanted peace. A place to breathe, to remember, to heal, and maybe, just maybe, to reopen the shop one day, even if it was small, even if it took years. As the afternoon light began to fade, I stood and wandered toward the back room, past the old wooden arch that divided the shop floor from the tiny office space. It was musty in there, darker, but the desk was still there. I opened the drawer and found a bundle of letters tied with twine, Grandma's handwriting on each envelope. Invoices, notes, a few old photos. I ran my fingers over one in particular, her standing in the garden behind the townhouse, younger, vibrant, arms full of fresh-cut peonies. She'd loved that garden, and I realized then I wasn't just inheriting a building. I was inheriting her memories, her work, her love, and I wasn't about to let anyone take that from me. I stepped back into the shop floor, the light now golden with the setting sun, and whispered aloud, "I'm going to move in soon, Grandma, I promise." The words echoed softly against the walls, and in that quiet shop, filled with lilac-scented air and years of love, I felt something new. Hope, not the loud, triumphant kind. The quiet kind, the kind that comes after loss, after battle lines are drawn, when you know you're about to walk through fire but you're finally ready. I locked the door behind me as I left, the key cool in my palm. And for the first time in a long while, I wasn't just surviving. I was beginning. The silence was eerie. Not a single message. Not a missed call. Not even a passive-aggressive emoji in the family group chat, which, until recently, had been a never-ending stream of urgent updates about Lauren's wedding. 3 days had passed since the will reading, and nothing. Not from Donald, not from Marissa, and certainly not from Lauren. At first, I thought maybe they were just regrouping, licking their wounds, planning their next move. But by day 4, when even Lauren, who once texted hourly updates about napkin colors, went completely radio silent, I started to feel something else. Suspicion. You ever get that prickling feeling like someone's smiling too much or being too nice and your gut just won't let it go? That's where I was. Still, part of me didn't want to question it too hard. Because I'll admit, the silence, it was peaceful. For once, I could breathe. I spent my mornings packing boxes, labeling things I hadn't touched in years, sorting through clothes, old college notebooks, random trinkets that somehow still held emotional weight. Each taped-up box felt like progress, like I was moving towards something new, something mine. And yet the quiet buzzed around me. I'd grown so used to dodging guilt trips and emotional manipulation that I didn't know what to do with the stillness. Was this grace, acceptance, or was it a trap? On the fifth day, I caught myself scrolling through the group chat thread, half expecting to see a new message pop up. Something like, let's talk this out, or family meeting tonight. But it was just blank. The last message had been from Lauren 4 days ago, a meme about Bridezilla mood that ironically had landed just before the lawyer dropped the inheritance bomb. I sat on my couch, phone in hand, staring at the screen. Okay, I muttered to myself. What are you up to? Because silence wasn't their style. Donald thrived on being the center of attention. Marissa couldn't go 48 hours without weighing in on every family decision, and Lauren, well, Lauren never stayed silent when she thought she was being cheated. I set my phone down and stood up, stretching. The apartment was half-packed, boxes stacked neatly along the walls, each labeled in black marker. Kitchen fragile, books grandma's, bedroom winter clothes. I walked to the window and looked out at the street below. Life was moving on out there. Dogs being walked, kids playing on scooters, neighbors watering their potted plants. And here I was standing still, caught between past and future. I had half a mind to text them first, just a simple, hey, everything okay? But I couldn't bring myself to do it. Not because I didn't care, believe me, I cared. I cared too much. That was the problem. I didn't want to poke the bear, but I also didn't want to be caught off guard. By day 6, my dreams had turned restless. I kept waking up in the middle of the night, heart pounding, convinced I'd heard the door creak open or footsteps outside. Once I thought I saw a car idling out front, lights off, engine purring softly. By the time I got to the window, it was gone. Paranoia, maybe, but Grandma used to say, when your gut speaks, don't ignore it. So I didn't. That afternoon, I started making a list more detailed than the moving list. A protection list. Make copies of the will, check property title, gather ownership documents, store documents at Dean's. Dean, my old friend from college, now a lawyer. We'd fallen out of touch for a while, but he'd always had my back, especially when things got messy. I shot him a quick message. Hey, you free for coffee tomorrow? Need some legal advice, family stuff. His reply came almost instantly. Of course, 9 a.m. at Bean and Brew. I felt a little lighter already. Still, as I packed another box labeled living room miscellaneous, I kept glancing at my phone, waiting. By now, I was convinced the silence wasn't just passive. It was strategic. I decided to walk it off, get some air, clear my head. As I passed my building's mailbox, I noticed something odd. A glossy wedding invitation poking out of the slot, Lauren's. I pulled it out and stared. Thick cardstock, gold leaf, and embossed L and T intertwined. Curious, I opened it. Inside was the usual fluff, ceremony details, dress code, RSVP instructions. But something caught my eye. Venue, Willow Lane Vineyard, date, July 18th. My breath caught. That was less than 3 weeks away. And the vineyard, it was barely 10 miles from the townhouse. I stared at the invitation, mind racing. No mention of the inheritance, no personal note, just a formal invite like nothing had happened. What game were they playing? Were they really expecting me to attend? Or was this some kind of power move? I turned the card over. On the back, scribbled in Lauren's handwriting. Let's try to be civil for the guests. Zoe, I laughed, not because it was funny, but because it was so Lauren. Pretend everything's fine, smile for the crowd, sweep it all under the rug, but I wasn't sweeping anything anymore. I tucked the invitation back into the envelope and walked upstairs, adrenaline buzzing under my skin. The silence wasn't peace. It was the calm before the storm. And I wasn't about to get caught in it unprepared. There's something unsettling about kindness when you know it's fake. You can feel it, can't you? The way a smile stretches just a bit too wide, the way a voice pitches too high, too cheerful, like they're trying to cover up a mess you haven't discovered yet. That's exactly how it felt when Marissa opened the front door. Oh, Alice, what a surprise, she chirped, pulling me into a quick hug before I could even step inside. You brought pie. How thoughtful. I held the still warm dish in my hands, resisting the urge to turn around. I figured we could catch up, I said, keeping my tone light. It's been a quiet week. Her smile didn't flicker, but her eyes, they darted past me toward something or someone inside the house, then just as quickly back to me. Well, come in, she said, stepping aside. You're just in time for tea. I hadn't told her I was coming. That's what bothered me first. I stepped into the foyer, my boots echoing softly against the polished wood floor. Everything looked the same, immaculate, curated. Not a single pillow out of place. The house smelled faintly of vanilla candles and something else, paint. Donald appeared from the living room, tea towel slung over his shoulder, smile equally bright. "Alice, darling," he said, walking over to take the pie from my hands. "You didn't need to bring anything, really." "I wanted to," I replied, eyes scanning the room. Something about the air felt staged. The tea kettle whistled sharply from the kitchen, breaking the moment. Marissa flitted away to tend to it, leaving me with Donald, who gestured toward the living room. "Have a seat. Let's chat, just us." I hesitated. Then I followed him in. The living room looked like a page out of a magazine, perfect lighting, carefully placed books on the coffee table, a fresh bouquet of roses that I knew wasn't there last week. I sat on the edge of the sofa, back straight, heart ticking faster. Donald sat opposite me in his usual leather armchair, crossing one leg over the other like this was just a casual Sunday visit. His fingers drummed lightly on the armrest. "So," he began, "how are things with the townhouse?" There it was, the question beneath all the cheer. "Fine," I said simply. "I've been packing." He nodded slowly, as if weighing his next words. "We've been thinking, your mother and I. Maybe we got off on the wrong foot at the will reading." I blinked. "The wrong foot?" He leaned forward, elbows on his knees. "It was a shock for all of us, but now that we've had time to process, well, we want to make things right." I didn't respond. Marissa swept back in with a tray, 2 teacups, sugar bowl, lemon slices, the works. She set it down between us with practiced grace. "Chamomile," she said, handing me a cup. "Your favorite, right?" It used to be. I took it, fingers curling around the warm porcelain. "So," Marissa said, settling beside Donald, "let's talk about how we can support you, honey. We know the house is a big responsibility, and with Lauren's wedding coming up, we thought maybe, just maybe, we could work something out that benefits everyone." There it was, the real reason for the tea, the pie, the sudden warmth. Donald nodded solemnly. "Think of it as a family solution. Maybe sell the property, split the proceeds. Lauren's been so stressed about the budget." I sipped the tea. It tasted off. Not poisoned, just wrong, like they used the cheap tea bags I hated. "I've made my decision," I said quietly, setting the cup down. "I'm keeping the house." Silence. Their smiles didn't fade, but something flickered behind their eyes. "Of course," Marissa said sweetly. "But wouldn't it be easier to share? After all, you've always said family means everything." I stood. Their eyes followed me, calculating. "I just came to bring pie," I said. "Thanks for the tea." Donald stood too, his hand tightening around the back of his chair. "Alice, don't be hasty, we're trying to help." I walked toward the door. "Just think about it," Marissa called after me. "For Lauren's sake, she deserves a perfect wedding." I paused at the threshold, turned. Grandma deserved peace, and I'm giving her that. I left without waiting for a reply. As I drove away, hands shaking slightly on the wheel, I glanced in the rearview. Their house disappeared behind me, but the unease didn't. Something was wrong. And whatever they were planning, it wasn't over. The air smelled like gasoline and sawdust. At first, I thought it was just construction on the next block, maybe road work or someone doing home repairs. But as I turned the corner onto Willow Lane, my heart skipped a beat. There, in front of Grandma's townhouse, sat a massive truck. Bright orange hazard lights blinked steadily, slicing through the early evening gloom like a warning. And beside it, construction equipment. A backhoe, dumpsters, piles of plywood and plastic sheeting. For one terrifying moment, I couldn't process what I was seeing. Then it hit me. They were going to demolish the house, my house. I slammed the brakes so hard my tires screeched against the pavement. I barely threw the car into park before I was out the door, sprinting toward the site. "Hey!" I shouted, waving my arms. "What are you doing?" A man in a yellow vest turned around, clipboard in hand. He looked confused. "You can't be here, ma'am. This is an active work zone." "No," I said, breathless. "It's not. This is private property. I own this house." He frowned. "Demolition's scheduled for tomorrow morning. Prep work's happening now." My mind reeled. Demolition, tomorrow. I looked past him at the front steps. Boards already torn up, part of the railing splintered. Someone had started prying the front door off its hinges. My stomach dropped. "No one approved this," I said, trying to keep my voice steady. "There's been a mistake. This house isn't being demolished." The man raised an eyebrow, flipping through the clipboard. "Got papers right here. Signed approval. Alice Monroe, right?" I froze. My name. He was holding a document, printed, stamped, signed. My name scribbled at the bottom in looping handwriting that wasn't mine. I stared at it, my blood turning ice cold. "That's a forgery," I whispered. "I never signed that." The man looked uncomfortable now. "Look, I just follow orders. Paperwork came through the city, all proper. If there's a problem, take it up with your contractor." "I don't have a contractor." My voice cracked with panic. He took a cautious step back. "You should probably call someone." I was already dialing. My hands shook as I pulled out my phone, scrolling frantically to find the police non-emergency line. This wasn't a misunderstanding. This was an ambush, and I'd walked right into it. By the time the police arrived, the sun had dipped below the horizon, casting long shadows across the half-torn steps. I stood on the sidewalk, arms crossed tightly over my chest, watching as officers cordoned off the area with yellow tape. The same man, Gary, according to his badge, explained everything to the officers. How the job order came through, how the permits looked real, how the owner had supposedly approved the teardown weeks ago. I showed them my ownership documents, freshly printed, thank God, thanks to Dean's advice. I explained the will, the inheritance, the sudden family silence, the strange hospitality, and the forged signature. One officer, a tall woman with kind eyes, took it all in calmly. "Until this is sorted legally," she said, "no one touches the property. We'll file a report, flag the permit, and notify the city." Relief washed over me in waves, but it was shaky, temporary. I walked carefully up the broken steps, peeking through the cracked front door. Inside, the house was dark, dust hung in the air, but it was still standing, still mine. I stepped inside, heart pounding. They had tried to erase it quietly. No confrontation, no lawsuit, just gone. I sat on the floor, my back against the cool plaster wall, tears stinging my eyes. I'd almost lost everything. But they hadn't counted on me showing up tonight. They hadn't counted on me fighting. I stayed there for a long time, listening to the quiet creak of the house settling, the muffled sounds of police radios outside, and the slow, steady beat of my own resolve hardening. They'd made a move. Now it was my turn. The house was quiet. Too quiet, considering what had almost happened to it. I sat on the bottom stair of the townhouse, staring at the yellow police tape that fluttered lightly in the night breeze. The steps creaked under my weight, half torn and splintered from the demolition prep, but still strong enough to hold me. It was after midnight. The workers had packed up hours ago. The police had filed their report, handed me a case number, and promised to follow up with the city. I should have gone home, I knew that. But I couldn't bring myself to leave. What if they came back? What if I walked away and returned to rubble? So I stayed. Wrapped in Grandma's old shawl I found tucked in the closet upstairs, I curled up on the porch like a watchdog, eyes fixed on the street, heart still hammering. I'd always wondered how far they'd go. Now I knew. The next morning I called Dean. He didn't answer on the first ring, probably still asleep, but by the third he picked up, voice groggy. "Alice, they tried to tear it down," I said, no preamble. Silence. "Then where are you now?" "At the house." "Stay there, I'm coming." By the time he arrived, coffee in hand, shirt half-buttoned, I had already taken photos of everything. The damaged steps, the broken lock, the construction equipment that still littered the side yard. Dean didn't speak at first. He just looked around, taking it all in with a slow, careful gaze. When he finally turned to me, his jaw was tight. "They forged your signature." I nodded. "I'll need copies of everything. Permit documents, that signature if you can get it." I took photos of the clipboard. He looked impressed. "Good, you did everything right." "Then why do I feel like I'm drowning?" I asked softly. He handed me the coffee. "Because you've been holding the line alone," he said. "But not anymore." We spent the rest of the day making calls. First to the city office, where we confirmed the demolition had been fast-tracked, approved just a week ago under my name. Then to the police, who added the forged permit to the open investigation. Then Dean made a final call to the district prosecutor's office. I watched him pace the living room, his voice calm but firm as he explained the fraud, the forged documents, the attempted demolition. Every so often, he'd glance at me and give a small nod, "You're doing good, stay with me." When he finally hung up, he turned to me. "They're opening a formal inquiry," he said. "We need to file an official complaint today." I nodded, my fingers tightening around the coffee cup. "How did they do it?" I whispered. "How did they get approval?" Dean's eyes darkened. "Your last name, it made things easier. No one questioned it when someone named Monroe submitted the paperwork." My heart clenched. Donald, Marissa, Lauren. One of them had signed my name. It wasn't just betrayal anymore, it was fraud. Criminal fraud. As the day wore on, I started gathering every document I could find, ownership papers, grandma's will, even old mail addressed to her, proving residency. Dean helped me compile a list of everything, dates, names, events. He even added Lauren's wedding date just in case. They might be distracted that day, he said. It's a good window to make our next move. The phrase next move made my stomach turn. I didn't want this to be a battle, but I didn't have a choice. That night after Dean left, I sat on the porch again. The sky was clear, the stars bright. I looked up, trying to find peace in the stillness. But all I could think about was how close I'd come to losing it all. I walked inside, slowly, carefully stepping over broken boards and dust. And I made a promise right there in the dark to the empty house. I would protect it, no matter what. They might have tried to erase it, but I was still here. And I wasn't backing down. You think you felt betrayal before, an unkind word, a cold shoulder, a broken promise. But nothing prepares you for seeing your own name forged in someone else's handwriting. Dean spread the papers out across his dining table like they were pieces of a crime scene, and in a way, they were. These are copies from the city records office, he said, tapping the corner of the page. All submitted under Alice Monroe. I stared at the signature at the bottom. It looked like my name. Same letters, same vague loop at the end. But it wasn't mine. It was an imitation, a clumsy, almost theatrical mimic of how I sign when I'm in a rush. The A was too large, the M too tight. They hadn't just forged my name, they'd studied it. I felt my stomach drop. How? I couldn't finish the question. My voice caught somewhere between shock and rising nausea. Dean didn't answer immediately. He just watched me, giving me space to process it. I picked up another paper, an approval form for demolition bearing a city seal and a contractor's name I didn't recognize. "Who's this?" I asked. He pulled a file from the side and flipped it open. "A contracting firm out of Raleigh. Small outfit. Registered under Monroe Holdings, LLC. I blinked. "Monroe," he nodded grimly. "That's the name on the application for transfer of property rights, too." "What transfer?" Dean handed me another paper, this one older, dated just 2 weeks after Grandma's death. It was a transfer request to move the property title from my name to Monroe Holdings, LLC. Again, forged with my signature. "That's not just fraud," Dean said quietly. "It's premeditated fraud. They planned to make it look like you sold the house." My heart pounded in my ears. "They were going to erase me," I whispered. "They tried," Dean said. "They just didn't count on you being there when the demolition started." I sat down hard. All the silence, the fake smiles, the tea, the pie, the eerie calm, it made sense now. They weren't waiting. They were moving behind my back. Lauren's wedding, the family solution. The sudden warm hospitality, it was all cover. A distraction while they quietly tried to steal what Grandma had left to me. "What now?" I asked, staring at the papers like they might vanish. "We file a formal complaint," Dean said. "And we notify the district prosecutor. This isn't just a civil matter anymore." I shook my head slowly. "I still don't understand how they pulled this off." Dean hesitated. "They probably used your personal information. Stuff only family would have. Your birth certificate, your signature on old documents, maybe even identity documents Grandma kept." My breath caught. That small desk drawer in Grandma's shop, the one she kept locked. I'd never checked it after her passing. I clenched my hands into fists. "They used her trust," I said, voice shaking. "Her memory, her documents to do this." Dean's jaw tightened. "Alice, we're going to stop them." I nodded, but something inside me had shifted. It wasn't just about protecting the house anymore. It was about reclaiming everything they'd tried to steal. My home, my name, my place in this family. I spent the rest of the evening gathering more proof, photos, mail, texts. Dean made copies, filing everything neatly. Before I left, he handed me a folder. "You'll need this when you file the complaint. And Alice," I looked at him, "you're not alone in this." I didn't know what to say, so I just nodded. When I got home, I sat on the couch with that folder on my lap, staring at my name in someone else's handwriting. And I made a vow. They thought they could erase me, but I was still here, and I was going to make sure the world knew exactly what they'd done. I never imagined I'd spend a Saturday afternoon prepping for a legal battle against my own family. But there I was sitting at Dean's kitchen table, papers spread out in front of us like pieces of a puzzle that, when put together, spelled fraud. Betrayal, justice. Dean was calm, methodical, but I could see it in the set of his jaw. He was angry, not just as a lawyer, but as my friend. And honestly, I needed that, because I didn't feel angry yet. I felt numb. I filed the complaint with the district prosecutor this morning, Dean said, sliding a stamped copy of the paperwork toward me. It's official. They're launching a preliminary inquiry. I nodded slowly, my fingers tightening around the edge of the table. What does that mean exactly? It means they'll begin collecting evidence, interviewing people, and they'll need your testimony plus everything we've gathered. I looked at the folder, thick now with documents, forged signatures, permit copies, photos of the demolition site, Grandma's will, even my original ownership records. How long will it take? I asked. Dean sighed. That depends, but we've done everything right. You were proactive. You reported it immediately. That helps. I leaned back, exhaling slowly. My mind was racing with everything we still had to do. Lauren's wedding was coming up fast, just a week away now. And that event, of all things, had become our unexpected advantage. Dean tapped a list he'd written in clean block letters. Key events and addresses. Townhouse, Willow Lane, incident site parents' home, source of forged documents. Raleigh contractor Monroe Holdings LLC Lauren's wedding. Vineyard, July 18, all family present this, he said, pointing to the vineyard note, is when they'll all be in one place. That's when things could move quickly. You think they'll be arrested there? I asked, my voice barely above a whisper. Dean paused, then met my eyes. If the prosecutor's office moves fast and we've given them enough grounds, they might. I sat in stunned silence. Part of me couldn't imagine it. Donald in handcuffs. Marissa looking up from her designer clutch as police walk in. Lauren's big day imploding in front of all those guests. But another part of me, the part that had scrubbed Grandma's floors, stayed up nights watching over her, been told to share what was mine, that part felt ready. They'll never forgive me, I said quietly. Dean's expression softened. Maybe not, but this isn't about forgiveness, it's about truth. I nodded, but a lump rose in my throat. I wasn't doing this to punish them. I was doing it because they tried to erase me, to take what wasn't theirs, to rewrite my history with a forged signature and a bulldozer. I stood and walked to the window, looking out at Dean's quiet neighborhood. Kids on bikes, a dog barking, sprinklers ticking away, normal life. I wanted that again. Dean joined me at the window, setting his hand lightly on my shoulder. You've been holding your breath for a long time, Alice. It's okay to exhale. I closed my eyes for a second, letting those words sink in. I need to go to the shop, I said. Dean didn't question it. I'll drive. Back at the townhouse, the yellow police tape was still in place, but the equipment had been cleared away. It looked almost peaceful in the late afternoon light. I stepped carefully over the broken steps and let myself inside. The shop was dim, the air still carrying that faint lilac scent. I walked slowly, trailing my fingers along the dusty countertop, the shelves, the display table where Grandma and I used to arrange bouquets. Then I reached the small office in the back, the drawer, the one Grandma always kept locked. I knelt beside it, heart pounding, and tried the tiny key I'd found among her things. It clicked. Inside were old files, some brittle with age, tax records, business licenses, her marriage certificate, and at the bottom an envelope with my name on it. I pulled it out slowly and opened it. Inside was a letter in her handwriting. My dearest Alice, it began, if you're reading this, it means I'm gone. And I want you to know I see you. I've seen all you've done. I know the sacrifices. I know how they dismiss you. That's why the house is yours, not because of obligation, but because you stayed. You cared. Never let them take what you've earned. Stand tall, sweetheart. You have more strength than you know. Tears streamed down my face as I read it again and again. This wasn't just property. It was a promise, a legacy, and I was going to protect it. The sun was too bright for a day like this. I stood at the edge of the vineyard, the dry grass crunching beneath my sandals, my heart pounding a steady, relentless beat. The air smelled of roses and champagne, fitting, I guess, for what was supposed to be the perfect wedding. Lauren's perfect wedding. From my vantage point near the gravel path, I could see it all. The white canopy strung with fairy lights, rows of cream-colored chairs, tables adorned with crystal and linen. Guests milled about in pastel dresses and tailored suits, sipping cocktails, laughing, posing for photos. It looked like a dream, but I wasn't there to celebrate. I was there to witness. I hadn't planned to attend, not really. But when Dean called that morning and said, "It's happening today," I knew I had to be there. I didn't wear black. That felt too dramatic. Just a simple blue dress, one grandma once gave me, with a silver pendant around my neck and a small clutch in my hand. Inside it, my copy of the letter, her letter. I kept to the sidelines near a cluster of olive trees. No one noticed me. Not yet. And I was okay with that. Across the lawn, I spotted them, Donald and Marissa, beaming like royalty, moving from table to table, greeting guests with air kisses and firm handshakes. Donald wore a sharp gray suit. Marissa was draped in some kind of designer silk, her hair swept up in an elaborate twist. You wouldn't know, looking at them, that they'd tried to erase me just days ago. You wouldn't know the lies they'd told, the documents they'd forged, the bulldozer they'd sent to my doorstep. And Lauren, she stood beneath the archway, radiant in her white gown, holding a bouquet of ivory roses and peonies. She looked every bit the glowing bride. I wondered if she knew. Did she know what her parents had done? Did she help? Did she care? My breath caught as I remembered her note on the wedding invitation. Let's try to be civil for the guests. As if this was all a misunderstanding, as if civility could paper over fraud. Dean arrived quietly, slipping through the trees to stand beside me. He wore a dark blazer, his face unreadable. "They're in position," he said softly. My stomach twisted. "Are you sure about this?" I whispered. He nodded once. "The prosecutor's team is here. Unmarked vehicles. They'll move when the time's right." I swallowed hard. The ceremony was about to begin. Music started, a soft melody played by a string quartet near the arbor. Guests took their seats, the chatter fading into polite anticipation. Donald walked Lauren down the aisle, his expression proud, smug. Marissa dabbed at her eyes with a silk handkerchief, the picture of maternal joy. I stood in the shadows, heart thudding. The officiant spoke words about love, commitment, the future. I didn't hear most of it. I was watching the driveway, waiting. And then, just as Lauren and her fiancé lifted their glasses for the first toast, I saw them. 2 unmarked police vehicles pulled into the gravel lot, quiet and smooth. Doors opened. Officers stepped out. Time slowed. I felt rooted in place, breath caught in my throat. Guests turned, curious. A murmur rippled through the crowd. Donald noticed first, his smile faltering. Marissa clutched Lauren's arm. And then, like a wave crashing over a calm shore, chaos erupted. It was surreal, watching everything unravel with such quiet precision. Donald Monroe, my father, stood at the center of the vineyard ceremony, frozen in disbelief as the officer repeated his name. "Sir, you are under arrest for multiple counts of fraud and identity theft. You need to come with us," Marissa gasped, clutching her pearls like it was a bad scene from a soap opera. "This is absurd. There must be a mistake. Officers, this is a private family event." But the handcuffs glinted in the afternoon sun, clicking firmly around Donald's wrists. Lauren didn't move. She stood there, veil slightly askew, bouquet of ivory roses forgotten on the grass. Her eyes locked onto the scene, unblinking, as if sheer force of will could stop what was unfolding. "This can't be happening," she whispered. Another officer stepped forward. "Lauren Monroe, you're being taken in for questioning. You have the right to remain silent." "No, no," she cried, backing away, her voice sharp with panic. "I didn't do anything. I don't know what this is." I stepped out of the shade, my heels clicking softly on the gravel path. She saw me instantly. Her face twisted into something I'll never forget, a mixture of rage, betrayal, and desperation. "You did this," she spat. "You couldn't just let us have the house. You had to destroy everything." I didn't respond. I couldn't. My throat was tight, heart pounding so loudly I barely heard the officers finish reading their rights. Donald's eyes found mine as they led him toward the car. "You're no daughter of mine," he said bitterly. Marissa just shook her head, tears smudging her mascara. Guests stood frozen, murmuring in hushed tones. Some pulled out phones, others simply stared, too stunned to react. Lauren's fiancé hovered at the edge, unsure whether to go to her or walk away. Finally, the police vehicles pulled out of the vineyard, tires crunching over gravel. Silence returned. Dean appeared at my side, his expression unreadable. "It's done," he said softly. I nodded, staring at the empty archway where vows were never finished. In court, the truth came out piece by piece like carefully laid tiles. The forged demolition permits. The fraudulent LLC set up under Monroe Holdings. My forged signature, used not once, but 5 separate times across legal documents. Emails between Donald and the contracting firm. Bank transfers. It was systematic. Cold. Donald pleaded guilty, finally admitting to orchestrating the entire scheme. His voice in court was hollow, a shell of the man who once barked orders and called it love. Marissa admitted she'd gone along with it for Lauren's future. Lauren herself denied involvement. Whether she was lying or not, the evidence didn't tie her directly to the fraud. She walked free with a warning and a tarnished name. The judge ordered full restitution. They were to pay for the property damage, legal costs, and a formal public apology. I sat through every moment of the trial, not out of revenge, but for clarity, for closure. After the verdict, I walked out of the courthouse with Dean by my side. The sky was clear, the same piercing blue as the day Grandma passed. Somehow that felt fitting. "Are you okay?" Dean asked. I looked at him, my lawyer, my friend, the one person who'd believed me without hesitation. "I don't know," I said honestly, "but I think I will be." Months later, the townhouse no longer felt like a battlefield. The repairs were done, new porch steps, a fresh coat of paint, the garden restored. I reopened the shop quietly without fanfare. Just a small sign in the window. June's flowers open for love, loss, and everything in between. People came. Neighbors I hadn't seen in years. Curious strangers. A woman who said she used to buy peonies here for her mother every spring. And every morning I unlocked the door, breathed in the scent of lilacs and hope, and felt whole. I hung Grandma's letter behind the counter, framed in gold where I could see it every day. "Never let them take what you've earned." I didn't. I stood on the porch one evening, keys in hand, watching the sunset over Willow Lane. The house was mine, not because of luck or chance, but because I fought for it. I wasn't the same Alice who'd walked into that lawyer's office, trembling and unsure. I was someone who'd faced betrayal, fear, and loss, and found her voice. And I would never be silent again. If you've ever fought for something everyone told you to let go, if you've ever stood alone for what was right, this story is for you. Tell me in the comments what you fought for. Like, subscribe, and stay tuned, because the hardest battles often lead to the truest victories.